Welcome to Seeking the Divine. I'm Dr. Patricia Hill, and today my guest is the Reverend Dr. Cynthia Bourgeault. Cynthia is a multi-talented person who is a theologian, an author, a wisdom school teacher, and we're going to talk about the wisdom way of knowing, which is the basis of the Aspen Wisdom School and of all the wisdom school teaching that you do around the world. Could you tell us actually what the wisdom way of knowing is?
Well, wisdom is a title that as a way of knowing, it basically means not knowing more, but knowing with more of you, or knowing deeper. Mm-hmm. And that we tend nowadays to confuse wisdom with knowledge and knowledge with information. And so it becomes a quantitative sort of thing. The more information you have, the more knowledge, the more wisdom you're said to have. But wisdom is really integral. It's how you relate things in your body and being, and it definitely has a mind, body, and also spirit connection to it. Mm-hmm. So that's what we work on, teaching people how to work with truth in a way that involves more of their whole being. And this becomes particularly important when you're dealing with the field that I've been kind of credentialed in, which is spiritual truths, theological or faith truths, which just don't convert well into information or knowledge, although it's been tried that way.
Well, I think there definitely is a major difference between wisdom and knowledge, and most people don't understand that difference, but a lot of what you do actually is applied. It's practice, so people learn to do things that bring up that wisdom that's within them.
Sure.
Meditation and some of the other practices.
Meditation is the classic starting point in basically all the spiritual traditions and no traditions, because it gets the mind out of the way in its messy, kind of presumptuous and autocratic way, and gives some space for other underutilized faculties of our being to come up.
Well, the mind and the ego seem to be the obstacles here that we need to get past in order to get to that wisdom way of knowing.
Ah, yes, that incestuous pair.
Right.
You know. And so that's what we work on, and with meditation as the basis, you have other skills such as in learning to be present and to pay attention, to have attention under your mastery, to work beyond likes and dislike, all of the sort of good things that Eckhart Tolle made popular a few years back in his Power of Now. So wisdom way of knowing is really about developing these other skills of putting yourself in relationship to life and in putting yourself in relationship to the present with more of you than just your head.
I think many people have trouble understanding that concept because we are in this culture so in our heads, and I think it's hard to understand that concept that you talk about so often of kenosis, or letting go, or just being.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it's a learned skill, except it isn't a learned skill. It's the first and natural skill we came onto the planet with as babies. Mm-hmm. And then it got gradually interrupted as we became tots and toddlers and school kids. So it's a matter of recovering something that has almost been programmed out of us, but is really there all along. And often people come in touch with it very abruptly, unfortunately in traumatic circumstances, when the rug has just been pulled out from under them in their personal life, in their health life, when you get face to face with the question, is this all there is?
Well, there's a lot of that happening right now.
Yeah,
with,
there is.
The financial crisis, the housing crisis, people losing their jobs. A lot of people are hitting rock bottom. And interestingly, I think that's causing people to turn more inward or to become more spiritual. Some people, some are going the other way and are doing something that's very ego-based.
Yeah, it has been a really good time for wisdom schools as people, who have a little bit more leisure and have just like as in the old biblical book of Job, they were just doing all the right things, and all of a sudden the apple cart upset. Not their blame. And so it raises the questions, well, why? And who's to blame? And is this all there is? And if you can stay with those questions long enough, they lead very quickly to, well, what is this all about anyway?
Mm-hmm. I think many people have experienced what would be called a dark night of the soul here in the last few years with everything that's going on. And you can describe it much better than I'm sure, but as I understand it, and I've experienced it, it's when you feel totally lost and in the void. You have no place to turn, really, except within.
Yeah, all the games you've played aren't working anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that you used to get amusement out of, sometimes you don't anymore. And so you really do have to turn within and face the demons inside, and also face that very scary thing is, what if there isn't any meaning?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what if it just is this and this sucks, you know? So.
Yeah, well, I think we've been in that place, all of us, when we think, this sucks, you know, there is no meaning to it. But somehow if you stick with it long enough, meaning starts to emerge, and you start to find your true self.
Yeah, what we discover is that we are actually a source of meaning by the way we pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that if you can move beyond the like and dislike, for most people, your attention is grabbed. You know, and if you like something, you pay attention to it, and if you don't like it, you just off with it, and that just throws you back into your head. But when you learn how to pay attention, you're actually energizing a situation, and you become part of a living flow of meaning within it. And then, all of a sudden, the universe bursts into color,
mm-hmm.
and you discover that it's like falling in love with the whole planet again. And you discover that the most small and tiny things are amazing. A lot of people discover this, unfortunately, when they're face up against a terminal illness.
Mm-hmm.
And you discover the wonder of just being alive.
Well, your priorities definitely change
do.
When you're facing your own mortality, especially, or if you're just facing a huge crisis in your life, or deprivation, which many people have been going through here recently. You just have to see what's really important to you and discard the rest.
It's very interesting that my own spiritual teacher, Father Thomas Keating, out at St. Benedict's Monastery, has been giving this talk recently, which he first gave to the hospice gathering in Aspen a couple of years ago, where he said that, you know, we're all going to experience spiritual transformation at our death, but the spiritual path and the wisdom path simply allows us to do this before we die.
That's probably a very good idea, not to wait until you're actually on your deathbed, but to prepare yourself.
So you can begin to really engage the beautiful coherence that life really is when you begin to approach it from beyond the mind.
Well, in fact, you know, I can speak from my own experience that it does create such a richness and depth that wasn't there before when you can enter into that level.
Yeah.
I think you speak a lot about that in the wisdom teachings of moving into another level of consciousness almost.
Exactly.
What is it you call it, the Imaginal?
Well, the Imaginal is the realm that you can begin to access and be a part of when your consciousness is held in a different place. So I think the goal is to simply allow one's consciousness to become richer and fuller and more present to whatever is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's a great trap in the spiritual life to pursue other states, as if there's this world out there, this altered level of consciousness that I'm going to find. It's right here.
Right.
And that if one can simply pick up an apple and hold it and perceive it for the first time, or let's just take this humble cup, you know, and not just say, oh yeah, that's a cup, but to sense its texture and its shape and its color and the human hands that participated in making it. All of this is to just expand our consciousness to a fullness, something appropriate to what a human being can do.
Well, you're exactly right about that. It's not as if you're seeking a goal. It's almost as if you're going within to see what is already there.
Exactly.
Which so many of us are too busy or too preoccupied to ever do until we hit some brick wall that makes us stop.
Exactly. So there's a lot of talk, and in some of the religious circles, a backlash against contemplative practice being what they say seeking altered levels of consciousness. But I would say what is often demonized as an altered level of consciousness really only means a full or a spacious level of consciousness. And certainly, if you look at it in that way, Jesus would have had to have spent his life in an altered level of consciousness, at least compared to most of us.
Well, I think if any of us could access that level of consciousness, that we would be very fortunate.
Yeah, but what I would say is that it's not something way, way out there. It's just a continuing stabilization in the fullness that we can have right here and now.
We are approaching Easter as we're doing this interview, and of course, I think those of us who have a Christian background start to think more about Jesus as a person or as a spiritual teacher at this time. And you have some rather interesting and unique ideas on who Jesus was. I'm not sure they're totally unique, but they go back to some of the original teachings about who Jesus was. Who was this man?
Well, I think the first thing we'd want to say is that it's important as we begin to encounter this person to gently for the moment set aside all of the sort of theological images that the church has put on him later. And I'm not going to talk here now about whether they're true or false because it's not really relevant. But in his own time, the most important thing about Jesus is that nobody knew all those theological statements. Nobody would have known that he was the only Son of God or the second person of the Trinity or any of these things that we put
That
on.
all came later.
That all came later. And for his first disciples, you know, they didn't even know about the crucifixion or the resurrection. That all lay up ahead. So for those first gang of people that gathered to hear him around the shores of the Sea of Tiberias in Galilee, there was no sense of, oh, come and let's go see God's only Son. It wasn't like that. It was like with any other powerful spiritual teacher who's making the scene, the buzz begins to get out here. Here's this teacher who really knows something. Look, he heals. He's so present. Let's go see. So the first impression was what first magnetized people to him was simply the experience of a person who was powerfully, magnetically, compassionately present. And that shortly after that, what they were impressed with was that he was a healer and an exorcist. And it's very interesting as we go back and look at the Bible and take away, you know, once again our 21st century glasses, to see that nobody really followed him because he was a theologian or a philosopher. They followed him because he healed and he exorcised their demons.
He did miracles.
Yeah, so
basically,
that's who he was. He was a powerful spiritual teacher. Now my take on him is that what made that so powerful and engaging was that he was the first non-dual teacher that the Near Eastern lands had ever seen.
And what does that mean?
It means he comes from a unified consciousness, a unified field of vision. He's what the Eastern traditions would nowadays call an enlightened master, one who just sees from oneness and enables others to see from oneness. And this is both what made him so intriguing and so powerful to people, and also what made him so easy to misinterpret and to misunderstand.
Well, and I think that the person Jesus has been very much misunderstood and misinterpreted throughout history, and it's created conflict and wars and all sorts of crazy things. But what you do is to go back to some of the original teachings and the meanings. As we always say, Jesus wasn't a Christian, you know.
Yeah.
The Christian church was created much later, and I think a lot of people have been traumatized by that Christian church that was created later, so they don't really understand what it's really about at the basis. Fortunately, Cynthia, we're at the end of our show. Our guest has been the Reverend Dr. Cynthia Bourgeault, who is a well-known author and teacher. I'm Dr. Patricia Hill, and you have been watching Seeking the Divine.